When it comes to dystopian fiction, we all know that George Orwell's 1984 is the more popular one. His dark vision of a totalitarian state that invades every aspect of human life casts an undeniable shadow over our collective imagination. But another dystopia from that same era has its own merits as well. It's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which takes a slightly different approach to envisioning the future. Huxley's version of the future is not ruled by a brutal dictator or a sinister political party. There's no overt oppression or constant surveillance. Instead, there's stability, prosperity, and happiness, at least on the surface. This might sound like a good thing until you realize that this so-called happiness is manufactured and everyone is kept docile through a cocktail of psychoactive drugs. The citizens of this future world are conditioned to be content with their lot in life, whatever that may be, because questioning the system is literally unthinkable. We tend to think of dystopias as bleak and miserable places, and Huxley's Brave New World certainly has its share of bleakness. But the fact that it's not obviously Orwellian might make it even more unsettling. And what's more, it's uncanny how prescient it is. Even back in the 1930s, when it was published, Huxley managed to capture elements of the modern world that we take for granted today. So what made Huxley come up with this particular vision? Why does Brave New World continue to resonate today? And what can it tell us about ourselves if a story written almost a century ago feels uncomfortably familiar? These are questions worth asking, and they're ones that can help us understand not just Huxley's novel, but also the world he was living in when he wrote it. The first thing we need to do is consider the context. We usually think of the first half of the 20th century as a time dominated by the horrors of war and totalitarian regimes. But those things didn't exist in a vacuum. Between the wars, there were major advances in science and industry. Biology had made remarkable progress thanks to discoveries like genetics, which allowed scientists to study inheritance and ultimately intervene in the process itself. Psychology also took center stage, thanks to figures like Sigmund Freud, who developed theories about the unconscious mind that helped us understand how irrational drives and hidden memories could shape our behavior. Meanwhile, Freudian ideas themselves became a cultural phenomenon, influencing writers, artists, and thinkers across various disciplines. Finally, there was the rise of mass industrial production. As factories churned out more goods than ever before, consumers were faced with an abundance of choices, which promised to improve their lives and make them happier than previous generations. But these advances also gave rise to new anxieties. What if the power to control life itself fell into the wrong hands? What if our deepest desires and darkest impulses were laid bare, stripping away any sense of mystery or romance? What if we were constantly bombarded with choices to the point where we couldn't even choose what we wanted anymore? Huxley's Brave New World grapples with these concerns, imagining a future where science and technology have advanced to the point where they can address society's ills, but also strip humanity of its soul. Consider, for example, the drug Soma, which is taken by everyone from children to adults to the elderly. Soma is a kind of utopian dream, providing pleasure, euphoria, and most importantly, stability. It's a way to escape the pain and uncertainty of life, offering a temporary reprieve from the harsh realities of human existence. But Huxley knew that something like Soma didn't really exist. He was aware that any attempt to replicate its effects would be limited by the laws of chemistry and biology. So instead, he used it as a symbol of a deeper psychological truth. According to Carl Jung, the archetype of the mystic represents the human desire for union with the divine, a longing for a state of pure being beyond the limitations of our everyday lives. In other words, the allure of the mystic is that it offers a way to transcend the self, to escape the confines of our individual consciousness and experience something greater than ourselves. But this escape comes at a price. By chasing after mystical experiences, we risk losing ourselves in the process, forsaking our individuality and becoming one with something else entirely. And that's exactly what happens in Brave New World. The characters in Huxley's novel are not allowed to have their own individual experiences. They're encouraged to conform to the expectations of the society they live in, to embrace the manufactured happiness that's offered to them, and to forget about anything that might threaten the stability of that happiness. But perhaps the most insidious thing about Brave New World is that it doesn't feel like a dystopia at first. The characters seem to be content with their lot in life, or at least they appear to be. Huxley was well aware of the dangers of trying to create a perfect society through brute force. And he knew that a truly effective system of control wouldn't rely on violence or coercion, but rather on making people want to be controlled. From a psychological perspective, conditioning is the key to understanding Brave New World. Conditioning is the process of learning through repeated associations. And it's something that we all do all the time. As children, we learn to associate certain things with certain responses. For example, we learn that fire is hot and water is cold. As adults, we continue to learn new associations. For example, we might learn to associate a certain restaurant with a pleasant meal or a certain friend with bad news. Conditioning is a powerful tool because it allows us to navigate the world more efficiently. We don't have to think about every decision we make. Instead, we can rely on our learned associations to guide us. In Brave New World, the conditioning begins at birth and it continues throughout life. The characters are constantly bombarded with messages that reinforce the values and beliefs of their society. For example, the slogan "community, identity, stability" is repeated over and over again. This conditioning is so effective that the characters don't even realize they're being controlled. They believe that they're free to make their own choices, but in reality, they're simply following the script that's been written for them. But why would anyone agree to live like this? Why would anyone willingly give up their freedom and autonomy? From a psychological perspective, there are two main reasons. The first reason is consumerism. Consumerism is the idea that we can buy our way to happiness, and it's something that we're all susceptible to, whether we realize it or not. In Brave New World, the characters are surrounded by products and services that promise to make their lives easier, more comfortable, and more enjoyable. And they believe that by consuming these things, they'll be able to achieve a higher state of being. But in reality, they're just buying their way into a cage of their own making. The second reason is the suppression of individuality. We all want to be special, to feel like we're unique and important in some way. But in Brave New World, the characters are taught that individuality is dangerous, that it threatens the stability of society and the happiness of its members. As a result, they suppress their individuality and conform to the expectations of their society. This might sound like a small price to pay for stability and happiness, but in reality, it's a very high price indeed. By suppressing our individuality, we lose touch with what makes us human. We become like robots, following a script that's been written for us without any say in the matter. It might seem like Huxley was simply ahead of his time, but the truth is that he was writing about something that's always been with us. It's the tendency to trade our freedom and authenticity for comfort and pleasure. In Brave New World, this tendency is taken to its extreme, but it's something that we all struggle with every day. The conditioning we talked about earlier is something that we all experience, whether we realize it or not. And the consumerism that drives us to buy things we don't need is something that's always been with us, even if it wasn't called consumerism back then. In a way, Brave New World is a cautionary tale about the dangers of trying to create a perfect society through science and technology. It's a reminder that no matter how advanced we become, we must never lose sight of what makes us human: our freedom, our individuality, and our authenticity. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about dystopian fiction, I highly recommend checking out my other videos. You'll find all sorts of fascinating insights and perspectives on this enduring genre of literature. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe for more.